Okay, so it's 7, so we'll start now. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Pratik Bhartwaj, and I'm Extension Coordinator here at Peace Country Beef and Forage Association, and I'll be hosting this webinar today. At PCBFA, we work closely with the producers and stay connected to the challenges happening on the ground. That connection helps us guide the research and extension work we do. Tonight's webinar focuses on understanding your soils and making informed fertility decisions. Soil testing is one of the most practical tool producers have, especially as we move for the grazing season. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Hayford Gyamfi, a research coordinator here at PCBFA. Dr. Hayford holds a PhD in perennial forage agronomy from the University of Alberta and works closely with the producers here at PCBFA. Tonight, Dr. Hayford will walk us through why soil testing matters, how to properly collect a soil sample, and how to interpret your soil reports. Before we start, a few quick notes. This webinar will be recorded, and if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A section. We will leave some time in the end for the discussion. With that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Hayford. Dr. Hayford, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to share my slides. Okay. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, good evening to you all, and thanks for taking some time off your busy schedule to join today's webinar. I'm really excited that you were able to join. My name is Hayford Gyamfi, and as Patik rightly said, I'm the research coordinator for Peace Country Beef and Forage Association. My background is in perennial forage systems with a focus on soil health. I've been with PCBFA for close to 4 years, and I'm glad that I've been able to make it today. So at the end of this presentation, I hope that most of your frequently asked questions would have answers going into the upcoming cropping season. Okay, so I would like to start off by saying this. For the producers of us who are online, imagine I come to your field or I come to your farm, and then we sit down to talk a bit. You give me some donut and coffee. Oh no, I don't drink coffee. So you give me some donut and some hot chocolate, which I like best. And then after talking, I decide to go into your field, take some soil samples from your field, and start to look at it. There are a few things I'll be able to tell you about the soil. Of course, you will also be able to tell me those things. One, I can tell you what the color is because I can see that. I can feel it and tell you, I think this is smooth, so it might be a clay soil, or it's rough, so it's probably a sandy soil. I can also smell you and let you know how it smells, or even the moisture. I can tell you, I think the soil is too dry or this soil is too wet. But there's something I would not be able to tell you, and that is being able to tell you the nutritional makeup or even the biological makeup of the soil. And that is what we are going to look at today. So I titled this webinar From Dirt to Decisions. I mean, we don't like calling our soils dirt, but just for this context, I say we are moving from what dirt to decisions. Before I go on, I hope that we are all happy with the amount of snow we've had over the winter period, and we are staying warm, and hopefully it's going to give us some background going into the spring season to start with our cropping season. Okay, so for today's webinar, so for today's webinar, we are going to look at why soil testing is even important. Then how do we soil test? And when do we have to soil test? And is it expensive or is it cheap to soil test? We'll look at that in this webinar, and how to understand our results after we've had it from the lab. and going forward, what plans to make for our cropping season. And obviously, we'll take something home as a take-home message. And if there are discussions or questions, we can all look at that going forward. Okay, so why is it even important to soil test? That is a good question. But I should say that soil testing itself is what is done at the lab. So it's the procedure through which the soil that you take to the lab undergoes for you to know what it contains. But before we do that, we would have to take the soil sample first before it undergoes all the procedure in the lab. So I'm going to tell you few importance of why we soil test. There might be 15 or 20 importance of why we soil test, but I'm going to take you through 5 which are defining and can really help us. So first of all, research have shown that when we're able to soil test and we know what our soil has or contain in terms of nutrients, it helps us a lot in terms of helping us save some money. Now, because we soil test, for example, we know that, okay, my soil is having maybe 2 pounds of nitrogen. So going into the season, I would know how much of nitrogen to add to take my crop, whether barley, oats, or canola through the growing season. And since we're able to soil test, we'll be able to cut down the cost of fertilizer. We will not play guessing game here and there. We'll just go and buy the right quantity that can help us crop go through the growing season. Research have shown that those who base their fertility decisions on soil testing typically are able to save up between 10 to 30% on fertility cost because they eliminate the guessing game and they're able to buy what they need for the field. So that is one importance of why we soil test. Apart from that, it also boosts yield and crop performance. Once we know what we are putting in, it means that we are giving the plant the overall capacity to absorb what they need and possibly avoid a lot of leaching in our cropping system. So it also helps boost the yield and crop performance overall. And then it also prevents some hidden problems. Now, unless we test our soils, we will not understand whether it's an acidic soil, whether it has salt buildup, whether it's an alkaline soil, or it's even contaminated. It's until when we are able to test that we can uncover some of these hidden problems like high pH or low pH. Now, in the picture you see there, or the image you see there, that is a field that is having high amount of soil. Well, one can walk into this field and say, oh, I think this soil is having salt with previous experiences. But until you test such fields, it will be very difficult for you to tell that it's having too much salt. And it also helps improve fertility efficiency. Once we are able to soil test, we are able to know when to apply a fertilizer, how to apply them, even where to place them to avoid losing them through runoffs or volatilization. So fertilizer efficiency is key here. And then the last one I'd like to leave you with is the fact that it protects your land long term. Once we have an idea of what our soil is, we know the organic matter, how the structure is, it gives us an idea of how to properly manage it going forward so that our soils will be productive year after year and we don't have to deal with lots of issues. All right, so the bottom line here for our soil testing is the fact that when we are able to soil test to provide we producers with clear and factual information of our fields, and that will help us kind of make informed decisions about our cropping system and the way forward. We are going to eliminate the assumptions, the guessing games, and we'll do the right applications for the overall benefit of our farming enterprise. All right, so how do we soil test? As I said, the soil testing itself is more of analyzing it in the lab. But before we soil test, we have to take samples to the lab. When I come to your fields, I cannot take the whole field to the lab. I need to take soil samples from the lab. So from the field. So that soil sample is going to represent the whole field, and that is what I'm going to soil test. But before we soil sample, so soil sampling is just taking bits of the soil we have in the field. Before we soil sample, we have to consider some of these important considerations. And I'm going to take you through 5 of them. The first one I'd like to touch on is the topography of the land. Now, when we go into our fields, some fields are kind of having steep slope, others are having a bit of valley, others are undulating. These are different terrains and different topographies. When we want to sample such fields, we can't sample it as if it's a flat land. When you have a flat land, that is a different case altogether. But you have that undulating and valley-like fields, you have to separate them, taking into account the topography. Because when you sample in a valley of a field compared to the slope, they are going to be totally different in terms of nutritional content, because when you have erosion, it comes down and everything, the topsoil and nutrient, everything builds up somehow in the valley. So taking soil samples from that valley might be more in terms of nutritional content than the one you have on the slope. So we do have to take the topography of our land into consideration when we want to soil sample. Now, the size and area of the field. The way I would sample maybe a 10-acre plot might be different from sampling, let's say, a quarter section. A 10-acre plot is kind of a minimal size, but when you are sampling around 160 acres, that is a lot. So there should be a plan in place for you to sample and capture each bit of the area. And the management histories, we have to consider how we've previously managed our lands. So let's say that we've got, let's say, 10-acre field. The previous years, we dedicated 5 acres to, let's say, cover crops and the other 5 acres to barley. This year, we want to see, let's say, canola. When we go there to sample, we don't have to sample as if the whole 10 acres was previously used the same. We have to sample the cover crop section differently from that of the cereal crop, and not to mix them. So we have to take into consideration the cropping, the management history we engaged in previously. And then the needs of the crop and the depth. Usually the rhizosphere of annual crops will be anywhere between maybe 15 centimeters, about 6 inches, but we sometimes sample beyond that because of nutrients such as sulfur and nitrates, which travels a bit deeper than the other nutrients that we talk about. So we have to consider your crop and the depth at which you want to sample. If you want to sample or you want to seed a perennial field, probably you want to go a bit deeper. We have a producer who once said, oh, Hayford, I want to see what is down there after 30 years of seeding my perennial. So I went in there and I did up to about 1 meter. So anyway, you can also sample up to that depth and kind of understand what is going on down there. And then the last one is the equipment that we use in sampling. There are so many equipment that we can use. We have the step-on soil probe. We have a hydraulic soil sampler. Some producers are able to use shovel or spade, and others are able to use auger. We have to consider which options we have when we want to sample. I like to state here that Peace Country Beef and Forage Association currently offers members the option of 1 free soil test per year. We also have a hydraulic track-mounted soil sampler that we recently acquired to help us with a lot of sampling. All right, so we have taken into consideration some important steps that we have to consider when we want to sample. So we now go into the field. How do we have to sample? As I said, all terrains may not be the same. So when you go there to sample, you can actually divide your field into grades, into, let's say, block, if I should put it. And then within each block, depending on cropping history, you can do a zigzag sampling, as you see in the image there. Possibly a 10 to 15 core in a 10-acre field is good enough. So you take a bit of soil cores from each part of the field to represent the whole field. And then that is what you bulk together, forming a composite sample. So that is what is going to be shipped to the lab. So we say that if you have, let's say, between 10 to 15, 20 acres, you can do a maximum of about 15 cores throughout the field. So you can do a zigzag. The idea is to represent the whole field. I should say that you should avoid low spots when you want to sample the fields, and obviously as areas close to the border of the field, because mostly that is where our tractors come through. You want to avoid compacted areas as well. So at least you move into the field maybe 50 to 75 meters into the field, and that is where you begin your sampling. And these are on my right. I don't know if on your screen is the same. On my right, these are some of the equipment that we use in sampling. This is a step-on soil sampler. And as I said, Peace Country Beef and Forage Association recently obtained this hydraulic soil sampler. So we could give you that service as well. All right, so we've gone into the field. We've looked at how we can take the soil sample itself. And now we are going to look at how we prepare it. So if you look at this image here, these are some of the equipment. We have an auger here. We have a step-on probe. And as I said, some producers would love to use spade to as soil sample. That is fine. The only thing is you have to be careful when you are using the spade. The best way to use the spade to soil sample is, like you see in the image here, you have to make a V shape to the depth that you want to sample. Now, you don't take that sample that you have made in the V shape. That has to be thrown away. On the side of the V shape, that is what you slice to the point where you like it. And that is what you have to bring to the lab, not what you've dug in the form of V shape. Now, when you have that, you have to mix everything together because you've taken it in different places. You have to mix it very well and take subsample from it, maybe 1.5 cups to about 1 pound or 2 pounds. That will be enough for the lab. Sometimes they request that they want to do maybe a physical test like the texture. They will request for more soil samples if that is the case. And you properly label your sampling bag, the name of your farm, the sample there, the date you took it, and all the information that you would have to put on the bag. All right. So when do we have to sample? An easy answer will be probably every time, except the winter. I mean, in the winter, you can't really do much. So let's look at when is it appropriate for us to soil sample. Now, we can soil sample in the fall, and we can soil sample in the spring as well. Both of them have their pros and cons. When we're able to soil sample in the fall, because we've just harvested our crops in the fall, the soil is a bit not too wet. We're able to drive on, walk on. It's easier to sample during that time. And because the soil is not too wet, we're able to take the soil samples from the probe easily when we soil sample. Again, when we soil sample in the fall, what happens is it gives us enough room for planning. I sample, let's say in September, October, until maybe April when I begin to go to the field. I have ample time to decide on what to do. I get my results back as early as possible to decide on what to do and probably see my agronomist to kind of guide me on what to do. Again, during that time, since you have your results, I think it's more cheaper to decide on your fertilizer in the spring. In the fall, or in the fall and winter than in the spring. I think it's a bit more cheaper in the spring. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone here. It will be cheaper in the fall and winter than in the spring. So it gives you ample time to kind of plan. You can sample in the spring, all right, which gives you more of an accurate and current state of your nutrient, especially your nitrogen. But I mean, you wouldn't have ample time to kind of planning in case something goes wrong at the lab or anything like that. It would be difficult to get your results, and that would kind of affect your plans going forward. So it's all up to the producer which one works best for the producer. And also, apart from this fall soil sampling spring, during the growing season, you can do fertility. You can do soil sampling to look at your biological makeup as well during the growing season. And also, sometimes we do tissue analysis because probably we are seeing a yellowing of some of the plants. We are having the rain, but yet our crops are browning, or is there a deficiency? We can take some of the tissues, the leaves in particular, to the lab so that we can detect if there is any kind of nutrient deficiency. So the best time to sample, it can be in the fall. I see that the fall has more advantages. It can also be in the spring. Okay, so is it even expensive to soil sample? Is it cheap? Let's look at some numbers here. As I said, Peace Country Beef and Forage Association, we offer these services. So we recently acquired a new mounted hydraulic soil sampler. So if you're a member, we come out there to sample one of your field. If you're a member, we give it to you at $80. If you're a non-member, that would be $110. If 3 fields, we give you $70 as a member, and a non-member $90. If it's 5 fields, we give it to you at $60 for members and $80 for non-members. Now, after we've collected this will go to the lab. At the lab, it undergoes various procedures and what we call packages, the kind of analysis they do. They can do a basic analysis, which usually includes the macronutrients, and they can do a complete one, which includes both the macro and micronutrients. The macronutrients are those that are required by plants in large quantities, and the micronutrients or the trace nutrients are those that are required by plants in lower quantities. Now, the packages cost at the lab is for the complete is $35, and for the complete is $47, and for the basic analysis is $35. So this is kind of a picture of what it probably might cost you when we do the sample for you and we take it to the lab. Unless you want to use the spade and shovel, that is also fine. You can use it, and when it comes, you can ship it to the lab, and then you can bear the cost of the analysis. I should state that apart from this, the lab also offers the soil health test. So if you want to check your soil health, we have the soil health test 1 and soil health test 3. The test 3 is a more complete one, which gives you an idea of the biology, the bacteria, the fungi, among other things in the soil. That is about $150. And then the HS test 1 is about $75. That doesn't really give you an in-depth one. It gives you your carbon, your CN ratio, among other things. So you can also do a test to look at the biology of the soil. All right, so we've taken our samples from the field, we've prepared them, and we've shipped them to the lab. The lab has processed and analyzed them. Now we get the results back. As producers, what does it even mean to us? How do we read it? Okay, so I'm going to take you through 3 of the reports that I've put here just for emphasis. One is going to be on a rotational grazing pasture land. One is going to be on a multi-species cropland. The final one is going to be on an annual grain field. All right, so I have these results from the lab. This is from E&L lab. Okay, so as a producer, when I see this, it has so many numbers, but we'll try to break it down so we would understand what they mean. Now, everything here you see here, it has to be considered because it's telling you the current state of your land. You don't have to kind of forget about anything. You have to consider them. But I'm going to take you through a few of them, and we understand what they mean. All right. So when I get a result like this, the first thing I look at personally will be the soil pH. That is the first thing I look at. Now, on this soil report, there's the depth at which the soil samples were taken were from 0 to 6 and 6 to 12 inches soil depth. So the first thing I personally will look at is the soil pH. The soil pH is going to tell me whether my soil is acidic or is alkaline or is basic. Usually, the ideal range for our pH should be between 6.0 to about 7.3. That is the ideal range. That is where our plants will be able to make use of the nutrients in the soil. So if I take 0 to 6, for example, my pH is 7.1 right here. That is telling me that, well, at that depth, my soil is in the ideal situation. It's good for me. Now, the other thing I will look at is the organic material content. Now, when I look at the organic material content, it will tell me how you have used your land in subsequent years. In this case, for this producer, 0 to 6, the organic material content is 13.3. That is very high. That is good, because usually we are looking at an ideal range above 5. So having 13.3 is a lot of organic material. Okay, then after that, there are other few things that I'll look at. I come and look at the CEC. The CEC is the cation exchange capacity of the soil. Now, the cation exchange capacity of the soil is telling me the capacity of the soil to kind of replenish its cations when it is lost into the soil solutions. So the soil itself, as we see it, the surface is usually negatively charged and the cations are positively charged. And we say that like poles repel, right? And unlike poles attract. So the surface being a negative charge and the cations being a positive charge means that it's going to attach itself to the soil surface. When it's not able to attach itself to the soil surface, it's going to go into the soil solution and it might be lost through leaching and among other things. So all the tests that we do, we make sure that our soil should have a high CEC, that it should have a high a cation exchange capacity. The better, the higher your exchange cation exchange capacity, the better you are with where your nutrients are going to be. So then after the cation exchange capacity, I can look at the percentage of base saturations. That is just the proportions of cations or the percentages of cations that have been attached to the soil surfaces. And they are also here. So I do have the ranges for the cation exchange, for the base saturations here. So for K, it should be between 3 to 6. Mg should be between 12 to 15. Calcium should be between 65 to 75 in that order. Hydrogen should be between should be less than 10 because too much hydrogen is what causes our soils to become acidic. Then after that, I will look at the nutrients themselves. So here I have my phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, calcium, among others. What do they even mean? I should state that with these letters you have attached to each of these numbers here, the lab provided it. They are telling us that they are giving us an indication of whether that nutrient is very high, is low, or is medium. And you can see those letters down here and what they mean. These letters are based on the cation exchange capacity that I've provided on my right hand here, if you can see. Okay, so this is how it's read. Let's say if we take this phosphorus at 0 to 6, it's 30, and it's telling that it's medium. Now, it was made medium because they looked at the CEC. So if we look at the CEC for that, that's about 21.5. So I go to my guide, I look for phosphorus, and I look at where it falls within my CEC. That will be between 21.5, will be between 16 to 25, isn't it? And then it's telling me that it's 30. So I come and look at the range. So it's going to be between 19 to 33. And that is giving me medium. So the medium here was based on the cation exchange capacity. So you might have a soil which falls within 7.5, 7 to 15, 15 CEC. It's going to give you a different reading. So basically, the letters you have attached here is based on the cation exchange capacity of your soil. That's why I said it's good to have a high cation exchange capacity because your soil is able to hold these cations for plants to uptake. Okay, so for a producer, how can I quickly know in pounds per acre what this ppm means? So for the rule of thumb is that for our phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, etc., as well as the trace minerals in parts per million, you only have to multiply by 2. So in the case of, let's say, the phosphorus here, we are going to multiply the 30 by 2, and that should give us 60 pounds to the acre of phosphorus at that depth. The same applies to the other ones. The only exception has to do with sulfur and nitrate. Why? It's only happening that way because with sulfur and nitrate, they are very mobile and they can move beyond the depth that we are looking. So that rule of thumb doesn't apply for only sulfur and nitrate. For them, you have to multiply the value you have here by 0.3 by the depth at which you sampled. So in the case of, let's say, this 6, we multiply by 0.3, times 6 inches at the depth that we sample. That should give us around 10.8 pounds. That is approximately about 11 pounds. So for all the other nutrients, you multiply by 2, but for sulfur and nitrates, their form of calculation is different. Now, in my previous slides, I spoke about the basic and the complete soil test. Now, this was a basic one, so it did not have the trace nutrient. You can see that all the trace nutrients are kind of empty. But these are the ranges where the ideal soil should have their trace nutrients. So you are looking at zinc, iron, copper, boron, among other things. As I said, we should not take anything for granted, because if you have low trace nutrients in some of your soils, it might affect the uptake of some others. So we should pay attention to all of them. Nothing here should be taken for granted. All right, so this is from annual grain field, and the same thing applies here. So I look at my pH at different depths. I look at my organic material. Now with this at 0 to 6, you can see the organic material is about 5.5, which is okay. But if we should compare it to the previous one, that is 13.3. Now that tells me the kind of usage that has been going on. Now this is an annual grain field compared to a pasture land that has been in production for maybe, I don't know, 15 years, 10 years. So it is high likely that you have high organic material there, which is all right. So the same thing applies. The CEC falls within the same range, and that is how it's done. You multiply, for example, in the first lane, if you look at phosphorus, again, is 20. If I want to quickly change it into pounds to the acre, I multiply by 2. I know that is about 40 pounds to the acre over there. So that is how it works through. So this is from annual grain field. You can see it had lower organic carbon than the others. The CEC here is kind of a bit lower than the other again, but again, it falls within the guide, which is 16 to 25. And then this final one is a multi-species blend. We see that it's a multi-species blend. The same thing applies here. So probably look at organic material, which is 5.9, which is not bad. It's within the range. I look at other things. I look at the cation exchange capacity. I look at my base saturations, whether they are within the ranges or they are not. I look at my nitrates, my sulfur, among others. So basically, all results could be interpreted the same way. You just have to know, if I want to quickly change it to pounds per acre, I multiply the ppms by 2. But for the sulfur and the nitrates, that is different because of how mobile they can be. Now, as I said, we should not take anything for granted when it comes to nutrient, because when you have less or more of some, it can fight or be antagonistic, give an antagonistic interaction with others. For example, if you have high sulfur than required, it's going to give you a zinc deficiency, vice versa. If you have more zinc than your soil wants, it's going to kind of give you low phosphorus. So sometimes you end up applying your phosphorus and probably you are not seeing any effects. Probably your zinc there is precipitating the phosphorus. That's why you are not seeing much effect in there. All right, so I spoke a lot about the pH. The pH is a huge factor in how our plants or how nutrients will become available to plants. This is a pH meter. It starts from 1 to 14. Now, from 1 to about 6.9, we say is acidic. 7 is neutral, and beyond 7 is alkaline. Usually, most of our nutrients are available to plants between maybe 4.55 to about 7. So when your pH is within that range, you should expect that possibly most of your nutrients is going to be available to your plants. And of course, we should pray that we have a lot of moisture for our plants to uptake. So the pH, very, very important when it comes to how our soil nutrient availability. All right, so I put this here there's a fertility requirement for various crops. So if you want to start a new perennial stand, if it's alfalfa, this is how much probably it needs. If you already established alfalfa stand, this is what it needs. You have a grass stand, that's it. Established grass stand. And then our annuals, you see our cereals here, at least it needs this amount of N, this amount of P, and this amount of K as well as X. You look at canola, you look at P. So I just put this here as kind of overall a general requirement fertility for as a guide going forward. All right, so after all this, the sampling, the packaging, the shipping, the analysis, trying to understand it itself. After that, what next for us? We have our results. We have some options. We can talk to our fertility rep or agrologist to help us plan accordingly for a crop nutrition for the upcoming season. And also we can contact the lab, as many of them are able to help us design a plan based on our needs. And then you can come talk to us, Peace Country Beef and Forage Association. We are always here to talk to you. We'll look at your soil sample. Of course, preferably we sampled it for you, so that will become easier. We'll be able to help you plan ahead with your fertility goals. All right. So what can we take away from all this? I would like to leave you with the fact that we do not have to guess our soil nutrition, because that can be disastrous. We can either end up under applying, over applying, which always have their implications. And periodically, we need to soil tests. At least if you are not able to do it every single year, we can look at maybe between 2 to 4 years, we can soil sample to see what's happening with our soils. And we should pay attention when we are soil sampling. We have to make sure we capture the entire field, because we capture half of the field, it might not represent what is really happening on that field. And when we sample, we're able to uncover some of these hidden problems we've spoken about in terms of how acidic your nutrients, your soil may be, and we can find solutions to it. And soil sampling are tools, because if we sample with a rusty equipment, let's say our spade or our shovel is rusty, what it does is it ends up contaminating our soil itself, and you might end up having a false result, because you've already probably added some iron to it already whilst soil sampling. So we have to kind of be mindful of that. And then, as I said, Peace Country Beef, we offer those services, but usually you have to bear the costs involved for the analysis at the lab. And then we can help you with understanding your soil, and we can help guide your fertility recommendation based on what we see with your soil. And the final word I'd like to leave with you is a soil test is only as accurate as the sample that you have taken. So depending on what you take to the lab, that is the result that is going to come out. So we encourage that you ensure that you've taken the right sample, because only when you take the right sample that we can get the right results that represent the true state of your field. So thank you very much for joining the webinar. I am hoping that going into this season, probably most of your questions will be answered. If they are not, as I said, Peace Country Beef and Forage Association, we are always here to help. Or you can talk to me anytime through this. You can write to me. So if there is any question we can deliberate on, we can talk about it a bit. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dr. Hayford, for the informative presentation. And now we will move on to the Q&A section. If anyone has any question and if they want to ask any question. So if anyone has any question, they can type their question in the Q&A section, or they can also type them in the chat box.
Any questions? So, Patik, I can't see the chat because I'm sharing my screen. So, if any question is shared.
Yeah. So there is a question from Ken. How many points would you sample in 160-acre field?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. So, as I said, sampling 160 acres, that's a lot. You have to strategize. You can put it into grades and sample them. So previously, in the past year, when I went out to sample, I think I had a lot of quarter sections there, and I made sure I captured most of the field. So at least I did maybe close to 75 points in there because I didn't want to grade them. I really want to capture it, so I didn't release it. So I really made sure I went zigzag in that order to be able to capture as much as possible. But if it's a very small field, like 10 acres, as I said, or 15, I mean, you can do between 10 to about 15 points, making sure that you capture the whole field. So the idea is to capture the whole field.
Any other question? You can also use the chat option to enter your question if you're not able to find the Q&A section.
Are they able to speak as well?
No, they cannot actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, guys, so we'll wait for 10-15 more seconds, then we'll see. Yep, there is a question in the chat.
Okay.
There is one question says, thank you for the presentation. JC says, I see Michael is typing, so.
Okay.
So there is a question from Michael. Is the slow releasing fertilizer worth the extra cost?
Is this what?
Is the slow releasing fertilizer worth the extra cost?
Yeah, he's asking if low releasing fertilizer is worth the extra cost.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is. It's worth it because, I mean, if it's a low releasing fertilizer, it means that it's gradually going to kind of release its nutrients over the course of the growing season. So, I mean, but first you need to understand what's in there. If you don't know what's in there, then you can't even think of buying a low releasing fertilizer. I don't know if I got your question right.
In the meantime, we have another question from Tyrell. Would you expect different results if testing in fall versus in spring?
No, I don't think there's going to be a huge change between fall and spring. I mean, from maybe September to April, soils don't change drastically over within 5 months, years. So I don't think it's going to be. The only slight difference you might see would be in the nitrate levels between the fall and the spring. But generally, it's not going to change that much. No, it's insignificant. It's not going to change that much.
Then there was a sub question with this question. And is there any value to rotate testing times, like in spring 1 year and then fall next year?
No, so I would recommend that if you are soil sampling if your routine is to soil sample in the fall, please stick with fall soil sample. If your routine is to stick with spring, stick with spring soil sampling. There's no point alternating unless you really have to do that, unless probably condition out of your control, but you really need to stick with a consistent way of sampling your field.
Okay, last 10 seconds, guys, if anyone has any question. Okay, so we'll end the webinar today. Thank you again, Dr. Hayford,
Okay,
for your time
thank
today
you.
and then sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you
Thanks.
everyone who joined us tonight. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to PCBFA if you need some help with the soil sampling or even to understand your soil reports. You can always reach out to PCBFA team, and we are always happy to help. That being that said, have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and thanks everyone for joining.